video blog about the Office of Vocation Operations. I'm Bronwyn Corlett, and today I'm speaking with Tim Hackborn, the Office of Vocation Minister for the Indigenous Church. And Tim is here to tell us a little bit about his work. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you.
So, Tim, we were hoping you could describe to us how the Indigenous Office of Vocation is different and why that's important.
The Indigenous Office Vocation was set up based on the parameters that are described in the Calls to the Church document, which, as we all know, was adopted by General Council 43, and which is the basis on how the Indigenous Church was not just in terms of just formed in their identity, but also describes their process in how they were going to be a self-determinant church. And this is really important because of the historic relationship between the United Church of Canada, its predecessor denominations, and with the Indigenous communities across Canada. And as we all know, the residential school system was a big piece of that back in the early days, but since then the church has done its apology. The church has been supporting the TRC work on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission as one of the functional members of that commission, and as well as continue to strengthen and support Indigenous spirituality through the support of Sandy Soto Spiritual Center, and also the formation of the Indigenous Ministries in Justice. So Indigenous Ministries in Justice was formed under the former ANCC, which is the All Native Circle Conference, in which there was 4 circles that were responsible for the overseeing of the work of the church, the Indigenous Church. The Calls of the Church document has included many of the elders and community members that form the preamble, which includes teachings and values that has formed how we are going to continue the work in the new way of how the United Church has been structured. A key piece of this, of course, is that the Indigenous Office of Vocation is technically a separate office within the Office of Vocation. And this is important because it represents and allows for the Indigenous office to move and support with the self-determination of the Indigenous Church. And as a result, there's a lot of policies and structures of the broader church, the settler church, that the Indigenous Church has a different way of doing things or looking at how the work is done. And so as a result, and a lot of my role is to look at those differences and to look at how we are connected and interweave in our work. And a lot of folks that come from our Indigenous communities have a different path, a different experience, a different way of recognizing how their calling to ministry comes. It's a lot of the folks have elders and mentors who've they've known their entire lives and who've encouraged them and supported them to become leaders within the church. A lot of our ministers also suffer from the systemic issues that are related to residential schools, 60 Scoop, day school programs, and all those things that we're focused on taking away our language, our culture, and identity. And so as a result, many of our ministers are often having to learn what it means to have a healing ministry by going through their own healing process. And so the Indigenous Office of Vocation is really focused on supporting our ministers and empowering them to not just be able to have a healing ministry, but to make sure that they have the resources and strengths that they need for their ministry and providing that healing ministry across the church.
So I've heard you say that the calls to the church are influential in how you approach your work and approach and how the Indigenous Office of Vocation approaches its work. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. The Calls of the Church is sort of the guiding governance framework for what we look at for the Indigenous Church. It identifies the National Indigenous Council and the National Indigenous Elders Council, and also the work around the Board of Vocation and Indigenous Candidacy Board. And so this the really important to note is because um, the role of elders in the Indigenous church is really important, and not just in terms of being spiritual leaders, but highlight and bringing forth the ceremony and spirit and the Indigenous spirituality from the various nations that they represent, and so from across Canada. And so how this affects my work is that a lot of the interweave and a lot of different things that I do is requires me to consult with the elders on a regular basis. Sometimes it's almost every day, depending on the issues that are being presented. But the biggest concern that I always look at, and when we organize gatherings or meetings, is that we also look to our elders to speak to us and remind us of our responsibility that we have towards each other, as laid out in our creation stories as Indigenous people. And we believe that those things are grounding elements to how we live in this world. And well, that is a slightly different perspective than the Bible, but the preamble really includes the importance of how those two are connected and how we define what ministry is, who we say we are, who our ministers will be. These are various topics that are described in the preamble, and for that reason. And so when we look at our work, we don't necessarily look at the specific process, but we look at the outcome. And what guides us to the outcome is our values. And so the National Indigenous Church has the Sacred Bundle, and in the bundle contains items that represents values, represents community, represents teachings, ceremony, and that's what connects us and binds us in our work as a national group. And so with that, the Indigenous Office of Vocation has been supporting the Indigenous Candidacy Board to look at that similar process and say, what are the values of Indigenous spiritual formation? How do we guide our Indigenous ministers in their work, and not just the Indigenous candidates, but also recognizing that many of our ordained ministry personnel and even lay leaders need that support, which is how do they walk in the two traditions? How do they bring forth themselves in confidence, knowing that they're walking in relationship with the Creator, and knowing that this can be done and celebrated, and it also in a way to strengthen the resilience of our Indigenous community.
Right. And it seems important to note as well that those calls to the church are not just for the Indigenous church, those are for the United Church of Canada. So if ministers are watching that aren't part of the Indigenous church, and other members of the United Church, that those calls to the church are for us, for everybody, to read and to know. And from what I've heard you say, like the preamble is almost, well, I wouldn't want to say more important than the specific calls, but the preamble is what grounds those calls. So the calls might evolve with time and experience, but that the preamble and really the values behind that is what we should all be really aware of and hold in our hearts as we approach our work.
Absolutely.
Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the caretakers of the Indigenous circle that form this consists of elders from across Canada, from Indian church communities of faith. And so this took 4-5 years pulled together, and time and consultation with community and spiritual gatherings and you name it. And so we've been in ceremony in both traditions while talking about this work, while being in service and having worship, but then having a sacred fire and having our tobacco and our medicines together, and having our sacred bundle in front of us as we talked about this work. It's important to know that it's grounded in that identity. And so And in speaking about the broader church, is that yes, the broader church, through the adoption of the General 43 Council, the broader church has a responsibility to at least know what it says, and to understand that this is provides the basis on how we can begin a good relationship. Because while the apology has been given, our elders have actually yet to accept it. Because it is something is really important to understand, is that an apology is, well, as important, there needs to be words, there needs to be actions to uphold it. And so apology was 30 years ago, and the Calls of the Church document was 2 years ago. And so we are still in working our relationship together, and we're still working at how we connect. And so the regional councils and the staff and the various settler churches and the work schools, you name it, are having to rethink about how they approach Indigenous ministries. And some parts of the country, there was no relationship. In other parts, it was very active and very engaged, and continues to be. And so we're still very early in our new relationship together, in the new formation of things. And more importantly, though, what is different is that the Indigenous church can now move in a way that allows them to self-determine, not just in their identity and in our spirituality, but more importantly, is how we form ourselves in what we will become for the future. And recognizing that the church is going to look different in the future, one way or the other. And this office allows that. The Board of Vocation and the office vocation ministers, we play an important role of not just responding to the here and now, but supporting the candidacy boards and the spiritual formation work on what tomorrow will look like. And so for me and my role, being connected to these teachings, being connected to these things is so vitally important, and so connected to community and our ministers. And our ministers are often feeling displaced in the settler world. And yet at the same time, we have a number of settler ministers who serve in our communities who also feel displaced. And so they here now, and that work is how do we get people to feel that they can bring forth and live out their calling with the confidence and with the leadership that God has brought them forth to be. And so with that, I also look at is how do we also bring our Indigenous spirituality as a normal part of our United Church identity. And that is something that is yet to be lived out in the church. But as we continue to live out in ceremony, as we continue to bring forth the medicines and begin to show that this is actually a way to have a good relationship, not just with the Creator, but to be connected with the things that the Creator has made for us, such as the medicines, such as the sun and the moon, reminding us of the time and cycle that we have and our responsibility that we have towards each other. And this is why you hear all the time in all my relations, because of the teaching that connects us to each other and to all of us. And so with that, I look forward to seeing how we can strengthen our relationship, strengthen our ministry, and more importantly, how can we strengthen Canada in understanding its identity, that more than the materialistic world that's always in front of us. So
it's a very hopeful and optimistic message. So seems like a good place. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us before we sign off?
Other than we are still early, we're still doing a lot of things that while the settler church continues to move forward at its pace, the Indigenous church has had to start from ground zero. So we're still very early. We're still sort of the little brother, just by the sheer fact that we don't have a lot of things settled yet. And it's going to take time. Yeah. But what's important to us is not the process. What's important to us is the end goal. And our goal is to be in good relationship with with the church and all of our friends and all of our communities. And to
All our
build a good,
relations.
all our relations, and to be in a good relationship is different for everybody. But in the end, what brings us together is our common values and our common commitment and love for the Creator.
Thank you so much, Tim. Thank you for all the work you do, and thank you for your time today. And thank you to everybody who logged on to listen to Tim and hopefully share in some of his wisdom. So thank you very much, everyone. Take care.